Okay, so let's get right into it. When you think about branding, what comes to mind? Probably a logo, right? Maybe some colors. But honestly, that's just scratching the surface. A truly powerful brand is one of the sharpest tools in your business toolkit. We're not talking about art here, we're talking about strategy. And if you think that sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, let's just start with a number 285%. Now, this isn't just pulled out of thin air. This comes from a major Forrester study on the economic impact of a well-run brand. It's a huge figure, and it immediately makes you wonder, right? What if your brand wasn't just a line item on the marketing budget, but one of the biggest drivers of your financial return? Because that's the kind of potential we're talking about. This isn't about some fuzzy concept of goodwill. We're talking about measurable, bottom line ROI. So, that brings us to our first section. We're going to build the business case for great branding. This is all about connecting the dots between those creative choices, the logo, the colors, the voice, and actual financial performance. And this is where it gets really interesting, thanks to some incredible data from McKinsey. They looked at 300 different companies and found this undeniable link. The companies that really put design at the heart of their strategy, well, they didn't just do a little bit better, they completely blew their competition out of the water. And seeing it like this just makes it so incredibly clear, doesn't it? We're not talking about a small edge. We're talking about doubling the average revenue growth, doubling the shareholder returns. When you see the numbers laid out, the power of strategic design becomes undeniable. It is a massive, massive competitive advantage. Okay, so if great design drives these incredible results, how does it actually work? Let's get into our next section and open up the toolbox. We're going to break down the what, the actual psychological levers that great brands pull to shape how we feel about them. Now, here's something you got to remember. Your brand is talking to people before they've even read a single word. That communication starts instantly, subconsciously, and it starts with your font. Your typography is literally the visual voice of your brand. And this is so fascinating because it's all backed by research from places like Wichita State University. They found that different types of fonts have totally distinct personalities. You've got serif fonts, the ones with the little feet on the letters. They feel traditional, respectable, reliable. Think of a big bank or a university. Then you have sans serif fonts, cleaner, no feet. They come across as modern, simple, and way more approachable. Think of most tech startups you know. And that same study got even more specific. It's not just about serif versus sans serif. They found that if you want to project creative, you'd use something like Gigi. For formal, it's the classics, like Times New Roman. And if you want to be assertive, you go with something bold, like Impact. This isn't just artistic opinion, it's data on how our brains interpret shapes. Okay, so beyond fonts, what's next? Well, a recent Adobe survey asked people, hey, what's the very first thing you notice? And yeah, the logo is number one, no surprise there. But look at this. For 16% of people, that's about 1 out of every 6, color is the very first thing that hits them. It creates an instant emotional connection. And that connection isn't just about feelings, right? It directly changes what people do. That same Adobe study found that blue is the top color for building trust. But what's wild is that it's also the top color for triggering impulse buys. And for younger generations, this is huge. Over half of Gen Z and millennials say they've picked one brand over another just because of its color. Now let's talk about one of the coolest tools in the entire branding toolbox, the visual metaphor. This is basically how you take a huge, complicated idea, like, say, global community or innovation, and you pack it into a simple little picture that everyone just gets, instantly, no explanation needed. And to really see how powerful this is, let's tear one apart. We're going to deconstruct one of the most famous modern logos out there. When Airbnb did their big rebrand, they didn't just design a fancy new A. No, they built a whole story into a single symbol. And this is just brilliant. Look at how they layered all these meanings together. You can see an upside-down heart, which stands for love. You can see a map location pin for place. It looks like a person with their arms wide open for people. And of course, it's the letter A for Airbnb. They combined all these simple, universal ideas to create one powerful symbol that tells their entire story, belonging anywhere. All right, so we've looked at the toolbox, the what. Now let's see how the masters actually use those tools. In this section, we're going to dive into some incredible case studies of brands that completely transformed themselves. This is where all that theory gets put into practice. So let's start with maybe the biggest comeback story of all time. Picture it, it's the late 90s, and Apple is just weeks away from going bankrupt. They were seen as a failing computer company. The question they faced wasn't just, how do we sell more stuff? It was, how do we even survive? And this was their three-part master plan. First, they didn't just talk about being different, they launched a product that looked completely different, that colorful iMac G3. Second, they sold an emotion and identity with their Think Different campaign. It wasn't about megahertz, it was about being a creative rebel. And third, and this is so crucial, they enforced absolute consistency everywhere, from the beautiful packaging to the revolutionary retail stores. Okay, now for a totally different kind of problem. You've got Old Spice. It's a classic brand, but it had become a joke. It was literally seen as something your grandpa used. How in the world do you make that cool again for a younger generation? Their solution was a complete and total personality transplant. They basically decided, we're not going to make ads anymore, we're going to make hilarious, weird, must-share internet videos. The key insight was to entertain people first, to become part of the culture, knowing that the sales would follow once they had everyone's attention. This has to be one of the bravest branding moves ever. Back in 2009, Domino's was in serious trouble. Their biggest problem? People thought their pizza was terrible, and they were saying it loud and clear. Instead of hiding from that, Domino's did the unthinkable. They put that criticism right in their commercials. They called it their pizza turnaround. And the whole strategy was built on just two words: radical honesty. They stood up and said, you know what? You're right, our pizza wasn't good enough. They showed real, brutal customer feedback and then took the entire country on a journey as they reinvented their recipe from scratch. It was a huge risk, but it built an incredible amount of trust. Okay, we've seen the tools, we've seen the incredible case studies. For our last section here, let's pull it all together. Let's distill these big lessons into a blueprint that you can actually think about for your own brand. And this little cheat sheet breaks it down perfectly. There's not just one way to do this. You have to match the strategy to your problem. So, are you a startup that needs to feel premium? You follow the Apple playbook of design-led authority. Are you an old brand that feels irrelevant? Old Spice's viral reinvention is your guide. Are you facing a real crisis in trust or quality? Domino's radical transparency is the way to go. Or maybe you're changing your whole business model, in which case you look at how Netflix built a moat with exclusive content. It's all about picking the right tool for the job. And really, it all boils down to this one last, crucial question. Every single success story we've looked at, from Apple's Think Different to Domino's pizza turnaround, was built on a true, powerful story. So the thing I want to leave you with is this. When you look at your company, your people, your product, what is the one incredible story that only your brand can tell the world?